to Midnight Radio Horror. Tonight, we bring you the story of Aaron, a man whose ordinary life took a terrifying turn. A story that will follow him from his childhood all the way into the shadows that haunt him now. Sit back, relax, let the rain sounds soothe you, and let the black screen guide your imagination. Here's Aaron.
My name is Aaron, and I grew up in a small, almost forgotten town in rural Kentucky called Leachfield. Population barely a few thousand. A town where everyone knows your name, your business, and your past before you even realize it. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my childhood was simple, sometimes painfully ordinary. But ordinary has a way of hiding the things you never expect, the things that can crawl into your life unnoticed, until one day they're all you can see. My father, Ray, was a quiet man, stern in his own way but kind. He drove trucks for a living, often gone for days, sometimes weeks, hauling goods across the country. He'd come back with stories about roadside diners, storms that made bridges sway, and strangers who smelled of something otherworldly. I loved those stories. They made the world bigger than the small farmhouse we lived in. My mother, Linda, stayed home with us kids. She was the warmth of our house, the smell of fresh bread baking, the hum of a lullaby that never seemed to leave her lips. She worried about everything, especially me. I was restless, always wandering, always poking my nose where it didn't belong. Maybe that's why some of the things that happened to me later hit me so hard. I had always been curious, always looking too far, too deep. Dad had one obsession, his radio. Not a TV, not a computer, not even the truck's CB. An old shortwave radio that sat on a shelf in the garage. He said it kept him company, that the voices from faraway stations made the nights less lonely. I didn't understand it as a kid. It was just a box with a speaker and dials, dusty, humming with static. But to him, it was alive. He died when I was 12. Heart attack. No warning. Just gone. I remember standing at the funeral, my chest tight, staring at his casket, and thinking I could still hear him humming from the garage. Mom cried. My siblings tried to console me. Couldn't breathe. After Dad passed, the house felt empty. I remember walking into the garage one night, the radio sitting there as it always had, but now silent, still lifeless. I didn't touch it. Couldn't. It felt wrong, like it belonged to him and him alone. Life went on. I went to school, graduated, left for college. Life was busy enough to ignore the hollow spaces in my memories. But I always came back home, especially after Mom passed 10 years later. Alone in the house, surrounded by shadows and memories, the radio seemed to call to me. Not with sound, but with a weight in the air, a pull I couldn't explain. The first incident happened on a stormy night. Rain hammered the roof, wind rattled the windows. The electricity flickered and died. I went to the garage to find some candles. That's when I saw it, Dad's old radio. Dusty, static on the surface, just sitting there, waiting. I don't know why I touched it. Curiosity, maybe. Pull, maybe. I wiped the dust away, plugged it in. The hum was immediate. Low, steady, like the heartbeat of the house. I laughed nervously. It's just the storm, I whispered. And then I heard it. My name. Aaron. I froze. My pulse pounded. My breath hitched. Sounded like him. My father. The voice I hadn't heard in years. I stumbled back. Dad. I whispered. Nothing. The static hummed, but no answer. Then it came again, clearer. You shouldn't have turned it back on. The cold hit me then. Not the wind outside. Not the storm. Something inside the house, inside the air, that wrapped around me like icy fingers. I wanted to run, to yell, but my legs wouldn't move. I convinced myself it was my mind. After all, memories of my father were strong. Perhaps I was imagining the voice. But then it said my mother's name. Linda. She'd been gone for 10 years. And the voice, it wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was calm. Familiar. Waiting. I felt it then, a presence. Watching. Patient. Waiting for me to make a move. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. The hum of the radio grew louder. like it had something to say that no one else could hear. For nights after, the radio whispered, sometimes names, sometimes memories, sometimes things I couldn't understand. Things from the past I hadn't remembered. Shadows moved in the corners of the garage. Cold crept into my bones. The house felt alive, and not in a good way. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. Every night, around midnight, the voices returned. Sometimes Dad, sometimes Mom, sometimes both. Sometimes something new, something darker. I knew then that the radio was more than a radio, that something in it, or something connected to it, hadn't left with my parents, that it had been waiting, and now it was reaching for me. And that's how it all began, with a storm, a dusty old radio, and voices that shouldn't exist anymore. Voices that were mine to hear whether I wanted to or not. The first night I realized it wasn't just imagination. The first night I knew something was reaching through the static. Started like any other stormy evening. Rain pattered against the roof, wind rattling the old windows. I had been in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the unease that had become normal in the house. It was around midnight when I heard it. Not the hum I was used to, but a whisper. My name. Clear. Aaron. I froze. The hair on my arms stood on end. My pulse raced. My body wanted to run, but my curiosity, or maybe my denial, kept me rooted. I whispered back, Dad. Silence. Then the whisper returned, slightly louder this time. Closer. Not from the garage, not from the walls. From everywhere. From nowhere. Aaron. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold trickle down my spine. The room seemed to stretch. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. I reached for the radio, though I knew it was unplugged, powerless. The moment my hand touched it, a low hum surged through the room. Not from electricity, not from sound. Something deeper, vibrations that rattled my bones. And then I heard another voice, softer, almost a sigh. My mother's. Aaron. Couldn't breathe. I stumbled backward, colliding with the couch. My heart felt like it would explode. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Old memories, stress, sleep deprivation. But then the voices merged, overlapping, calling, coaxing, whispering fragments of memories. Childhood birthday parties, scraped knees, bedtime stories. Then things I didn't recognize, things I couldn't explain. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee, but something held me there, gripping me with a cold, invisible hand. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, listening. Then the air shifted. The room grew colder. Frost formed along the edges of the windows, curling like spiderwebs. My breath fogged in the air, and then I saw movement. Shadows shifting, stretching across the walls. Not my own. Not any shape I recognized. Figures that didn't belong. One shadow separated itself from the rest. Small at first, then taller, humanoid. Slowly, deliberately moving toward me. I scrambled backward, tripping over the coffee table. The hum of the radio intensified. The voices weren't just voices anymore. They were laughter, crying, murmurs, whispers in languages I didn't know, interwoven with fragments of my parents' voices. I got to my feet and ran, through the living room toward the garage door. The shadow followed, gliding across the floor. My legs burned. My lungs ached, but I couldn't stop. I reached the garage. I fumbled with the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Cold air gusted in through the cracks, carrying whispers I could almost understand. Aaron, come with us. And then I felt it, a touch. Not soft, not gentle, but firm, cold, pressing against my shoulder. I spun around, expecting something, but nothing was there. My flashlight, dead. My phone, no signal. And the radio, unplugged, still hummed, vibrating with a life of its own. The whispers intensified, forming words I could finally understand. You were always curious. Now you see. Now you listen, now you belong. I slammed the door open and bolted outside. The storm had eased into a drizzle, fog crawling low across the yard. The air was thick, heavy. I stumbled over wet grass, heart hammering. Then I stopped. Something drew my eyes to the old oak tree at the edge of the yard. Fog curled around it, moving like fingers. And there, just beyond the mist, I saw them, silhouettes. Not fully human, not fully shadow. Watching, waiting. A whisper floated on the wind. "Aaron, you're ours now." I don't remember how I got back inside. Only that I collapsed on the couch, soaked, shivering uncontrollably. The radio sat in the corner, silent, seemingly harmless. But I knew better. Every night since, the voices returned. Some nights just whispers. Some nights, full conversations. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes screams. Sometimes a lullaby that turns cold and sharp, like broken glass sliding across my skin. And every night, I see shadows. Not always in the same place. Not always the same shape. But always watching. Waiting. Patient. I've tried to explain it. To rationalize it. Tell myself it's grief. Sleep deprivation. Stress. But it's not. The radio isn't just a radio. The voices aren't just memories. And I know now. The past doesn't stay buried. It reaches. It waits. Calls. And tonight, I know it will call again. After that first terrifying night, I couldn't ignore what was happening. I couldn't pretend it was just my imagination. I knew that radio, my father's old shortwave, had a presence, a will, something that wanted to reach me. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. But I knew I had to understand it, even if it scared me more than anything else I'd ever faced. The next morning, I started with research. I dug through Dad's old notebooks, the ones he kept in the garage beside the radio. Handwritten notes about frequencies, call signs, distant stations, and strange occurrences he never told anyone. Some of the pages were illegible, smeared with what looked like water stains or maybe sweat. He'd circled certain frequencies in red ink, always noting the same thing: unstable, dangerous. I wasn't sure what he meant. Dangerous how? To whom? But I felt it already. Whatever my father had encountered, I was stepping into it now. That night, I turned the radio on again. I carefully tuned it to the frequency Dad had circled in one of the notebooks. Static filled the room, but beneath it, I could hear faint whispers, names, places, fragments of conversations I didn't recognize. Then it spoke, clearer than ever. My father's voice. "Aaron, you found it." I froze. The hairs on my arms and neck stood on end. "Dad, what is this?" I whispered. The static swelled. And then my mother's voice joined him. Soft, almost mournful. "You shouldn't be here." The voices weren't just memories anymore. They had intent. They weren't comforting or nostalgic. They were warning me, guiding me, or maybe testing me. I decided I needed to record everything. I set up an old tape recorder on the garage shelf right beside the radio. If this was real, if what I was hearing wasn't my mind breaking, I needed proof. I needed to understand. Hours passed. The storm outside returned, wind howling against the house. The radio hummed steadily, then whispers, first indistinct, then clear. "Aaron, come closer. See the truth." I leaned in. The static thickened, almost choking me with sound. And then, in a split second, I saw it. A figure barely visible standing behind the radio. It wasn't fully human, but it wasn't fully shadow either. Seemed waiting, patient, watching. I stumbled backward. My hands shook. The recorder continued to click and whir, picking up every whisper, every breath, every chilling syllable that formed words I couldn't comprehend. For weeks, I listened to the recordings. Every night the voices changed, evolved, revealing snippets of my father's experiences. Memories I didn't know existed, secrets of the town, the house, even the radio itself. One night, the voice said something I couldn't ignore. "You must leave before it takes more than your curiosity." Curiosity, that's what had always gotten me into trouble. And I realize now it might be the thing that destroys me. Then objects in the garage began moving on their own. The radio itself would tilt slightly, as if reacting to the voices. My father's tools clattered off the workbench, scattered across the concrete floor, and I wasn't imagining it. The tape recorder picked it all up. Metallic clanging, faint whispers, urgent murmurs. I tried to leave the garage once, but the door wouldn't budge. The air was heavy, thick, almost viscous. Cold seeped into my bones, freezing my movements, locking my breath. And then I felt it again. A presence brushing against my shoulder, circling me, invisible yet tangible. It was then I understood. The radio wasn't just transmitting voices. It was a gateway, a conduit to something beyond. Something that had been connected to my father, and now, through me, it wanted more. Couldn't sleep. I barely ate. Days blurred together, but the recordings continued. They told stories. Whispers of places my father had never visited, warnings of things I couldn't yet see, instructions in languages that made my stomach twist. One night, I dared to follow them. The static formed shapes, faint shadows in the corner of the garage. They pointed toward the back wall. And there, behind the old storage shelves, I found a hidden compartment. Inside, a collection of papers yellowed with age. Diagrams of the radio frequency charts, symbols I couldn't recognize. And photographs, black and white images of my father standing beside a man I didn't know. A man with eyes so dark, so hollow, it felt like they could swallow me whole. The voices grew frantic, excited. My father's voice pleading, my mother's voice warning. I realized in that moment that whatever this was, it was alive. It watched. It learned. It had been watching my father long before me, guiding him, testing him, maybe even controlling him. I left the garage that night with a pounding heart. I couldn't tell anyone. The town would call me crazy, but I knew the truth. I had touched something old, something patient, something hungry, and the radio, it hummed softly in the dark, waiting. After discovering the hidden compartment in the garage, I couldn't sleep. Every night, the radio hummed, the whispers creeping into my dreams, lingering in the shadows of my room. I started keeping a notebook, trying to write down every word, every sound, every fleeting shadow I caught out of the corner of my eye. The first time it touched me directly, I knew this wasn't just some trick of the mind. I was in the garage, sitting on the concrete floor, flashlight shaking in my hand, tape recorder beside me. The static grew louder than usual, almost drowning out my own breathing. And then I felt it, a hand. Not cold, exactly, but heavy, icy, like metal pressing against my skin. I spun around. Nothing. My flashlight flickered. The air smelled of something metallic, like blood, but faint, old, decaying. The radio clicked on by itself. A low, deliberate hum filled the garage. Then the voice came. Not my father's this time. Not my mother's. Something new. Something older than the house, older than the town. A voice that rasped like dry leaves scraping concrete. Aaron, you are here, finally. The hairs on my neck bristled. My knees buckled. I realized I wasn't just hearing it. I was feeling it. Every nerve in my body screamed, warning me to flee. But I couldn't. My curiosity, my obsession had me pinned. The tape recorder picked up words I could barely understand. The static formed shapes, almost like letters, twisting in the air around me. I reached out, trying to touch them. The second my fingers brushed the air, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in thick clouds, and then I felt it again, brushing against my shoulder, moving down my arm, cold and insistent. I fell backward, crashing into the workbench. Tools scattered, the hum of the radio rising, voices overlapping. I couldn't tell one from the other. My father's voice pleading, my mother's voice scolding, and the new voice patient, commanding, cold. I screamed, and then silence. For hours, nothing moved. The radio sat there, lifeless, as if nothing had happened. I checked the tape recorder. The static was recorded, the whispers faintly audible, but the weight in the room, the pressure, the ice in my veins, that wasn't captured. That was real. The next morning, I noticed something else. Marks. Small scratches along my forearm. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. I hadn't been touched by anything tangible. And yet, there they were. My skin burned where they appeared. Over the next few nights, the encounters became more direct. Objects moved on their own. The radio tuned itself to strange, distant frequencies. Sometimes I would hear voices in languages I didn't know. Sometimes my parents' voices would speak over them, guiding me, warning me. And sometimes, I swear I could hear other things. Something old, something hungry, whispering from beyond. One night I saw her, a figure, a girl, pale with dark, hollow eyes. She stood near the oak tree at the edge of the yard, her hair tangled, wet from rain, staring straight at me. She didn't move, but I felt her presence, heavy and demanding. The fog curled around her, shifting, almost like it had a life of its own. "Aaron," the radio whispered. I knew it wasn't safe. I knew I should run, but something in me wanted to approach her. My father had warned me in those scattered notebook entries about obsession, about listening too closely. But I couldn't help myself. I stepped closer. The fog thickened, pressing against my face, curling around my legs. My heart pounded. The girl raised a hand, and suddenly I was pulled forward. Not by wind, not by anything I could see. Something invisible, strong, gripping me, dragging me toward her. I stumbled, fell to my knees. The radio hummed louder, almost singing, almost alive. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the grip released. I scrambled back, gasping, drenched in sweat, shivering. That night, I understood something terrifying. The voices weren't just memories. They weren't just echoes of my parents. They were alive. They were sentient. And they were testing me, shaping me, trying to draw me into a world I couldn't yet comprehend. I barricaded the garage door. I unplugged the radio. I tried to sleep, but it was no use. Shadows moved in my room. Whispers came through my closed windows. The air carried that metallic, decaying smell. And the girl, I saw her at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach. I started losing track of time. Days blurred into nights. Sleep became impossible. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, and the radio never stopped. I knew I had to confront it. I knew I couldn't keep hiding, but I had no idea what I was dealing with. No idea how powerful it was, and no idea if I would survive the night. After that night, after the girl appeared at the edge of the yard and the radio hummed with its strange life, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was in that radio, whatever had been tied to my father, it wasn't just content with whispers or shadows. It wanted attention. It wanted control. I started keeping a journal, writing every event, every word, every sound, every movement. Because if I went insane, I needed evidence. Proof that this wasn't just grief or stress or isolation talking. It began subtly. I'd hear footsteps in the living room when I was alone. Not the creak of the floorboards, but deliberate steps, pacing, circling me. The radio, unplugged, would suddenly click on. Static, low at first, then forming words I could almost understand. "Aaron, you shouldn't be here." I would look around, heart hammering, but there would be nothing. Only the fog creeping along the corners of the room. The shadows stretching longer than any light source should allow. Then came the knocks. First, I thought someone had broken in. 3 short raps on the window, 3 on the garage door. But the doors were locked. No one was outside. The rain had stopped. The night was silent, except for the insistent tapping. I got close to the radio, and that's when I felt it again. A touch, soft but firm, on my arm. Cold. I spun around, but nothing was there. And then I heard her laugh. Lydia. Soft. Musical. Innocent at first. But underneath it, a rasp. A hunger. I tried leaving the garage, but the door wouldn't budge. The shadows moved differently now. Following me, converging, almost forming shapes. Faces. Not fully formed, but enough to make me recoil. One of them looked like my father, twisted, shadowed, watching me. The radio hummed louder, vibrating through the floor, and the girl, Lydia, appeared again. this time inside the garage. Fog wrapped around her like a cloak. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, almost transparent. She didn't speak. She just stared, waiting. I fell to my knees. My notebook slipped from my hands. The papers scattered. And then I understood. She wasn't just a figure. She was part of the radio, part of the static, part of something older than my family, older than the house. I tried shouting at her, "Leave me alone." Nothing. And then she smiled. I don't think you can understand what that smile looked like. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't human. It was patient. Promised something. Pain, probably. Maybe death. But it also beckoned. From that night on, I couldn't sleep in my own bed. Not without the radio playing. Not without the static, the whispers, the lullaby. I started hearing voices everywhere. The fridge hummed. The television emitted static even when unplugged. The air conditioner whispered my name. And Lydia, always Lydia. Waiting, watching, learning. I became obsessed. Obsession replaced fear. I needed to understand her. I needed to know why she was here, why she had chosen me. And the radio, the cursed, humming, alive radio, became my only guide. One night, I traced the frequencies again, searching for her, listening to her. And this time, I understood her language, not words exactly, but feelings, images, memories, whispers of events I hadn't lived, places I hadn't been. But they felt real and horrifying. She showed me things. A man disappearing into a cornfield, screaming, never found. Children laughing in a pond, their eyes hollow. A farmhouse collapsing, its inhabitants trapped inside. And all of it tied to that radio, tied to whoever she was, tied to the shadows that crept behind me even in daylight. The physical manifestations increased. My bedroom walls would sweat, doors slammed, windows rattled violently even without wind. Objects flew. I once woke up to my chair being thrown across the room. No explanation, no one around, but her presence was undeniable. I began to lose myself. Hours blurred into days, days into nights. The radio never stopped. Lydia never left. And I knew deep down she never would. I reached a breaking point. I decided to confront her. I grabbed the radio and carried it outside during a storm. Rain poured, wind howled, lightning flashing across the sky. I held it up and screamed, "Enough! I'm done listening. I'm done." And for a second, silence. Then the hum returned, louder than ever, and I felt her standing behind me, hands on my shoulders. I didn't turn, couldn't. I wanted to die, but I didn't. "Aaron," she whispered, "you can't leave. Not yet." The radio slipped from my hands. It hit the ground. Static exploded into the storm. And then she vanished. For a few hours it was quiet, almost peaceful. But I knew it was temporary. I had looked into the darkness and touched it. And it had touched me back. And now, it's just a matter of time before she returns. The silence didn't last. It never does. 2 nights after the storm, I woke up to find the radio back on my desk, plugged in, turned on. I never brought it back inside. At first, I thought maybe I had done it myself, sleepwalking maybe, but the cord, it was melted, like it had been burned through and fused to the wall outlet. And yet, the static buzzed on, loud and alive. I sat there, staring at it in the dark, every hair on my body standing on end. The clock read 3:13 a.m., the same time my father used to wake up screaming. That number, 313, it kept showing up. On receipts, on my phone battery, once even carved into the frost on my truck windshield. And then that night, Lydia spoke again, but not from the radio, from behind me. "You shouldn't have left me in the storm." I froze. My throat went dry. I turned around, and she was there. Not fog this time, not some faint outline, full, almost human. Her hair was wet, sticking to her face. Her dress was tattered, soaked through. Her eyes were pure white. No pupils, no emotion, just an emptiness that felt older than time. "You can hear me now," she said. "You opened the door." I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't move. The air felt thick, like syrup. My body wouldn't obey. And then she smiled again. That same slow, horrifying grin. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like someone was pushing their fingers through my skull. I don't remember falling, but I woke up on the floor hours later. The radio was silent, and on the wall above it, written in dripping black, "Where's room 313? The next few days are a blur." Sleep meant nothing anymore. When I closed my eyes, I saw her, standing at the edge of my bed, whispering things I didn't understand. When I opened them, she was gone, but her voice stayed. Sometimes it came through the pipes, sometimes the vents, once through my phone when it wasn't even on. They buried me there. They never stopped the broadcast. "You have to finish it." I thought maybe she was tied to a location, that if I found this room 313, I could set her free. I started searching. I went through the old radio logs my father kept. He'd worked for a local AM station, one that shut down years before I was born. WQNR, small-town broadcast, mostly weather and late-night talk shows. But there was one folder he'd labeled Room 313. No date, no context, just recordings, old cassette tapes brittle with age. When I played the first one, I heard his voice, and hers. My father on tape. "Lydia, if you can hear me, this isn't funny anymore." Lydia, faintly, "You said you'd let me through." Then static, then screaming, then silence. I don't know how long I listened, but by the end, I realized the truth. My father hadn't been broadcasting weather reports. He'd been broadcasting her. I drove out to the remains of the station the next morning. A decaying concrete building miles outside town, buried under vines and silence. Inside, it smelled of rust and rot. The air was thick, wet, suffocating. Every step echoed. The walls were lined with soundproof foam that had rotted into fungus. And in the back, there it was, room 313. The door was still marked with my father's name. The knob was cold, like metal left in snow. Pushed it open. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10. A cracked soundboard, broken microphones, a rusted on-air sign that still flickered faintly. And in the middle of the floor, the same model of radio I had at home. I felt her before I saw her. That pressure in my skull again. That chill that makes your teeth ache. The lights dimmed. The static roared to life, louder than ever. And then she was there, standing beside the old soundboard, her face barely illuminated by the flickering on-air light. "You came back," she said. He didn't finish the broadcast. I could barely breathe. My father had warned me. He'd always said the radio could talk back if you tuned too deep into the dark. And now I knew what he meant. I stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" She tilted her head, almost childlike. To be heard. And suddenly, every speaker, every broken piece of equipment in that room came alive. Voices screamed, laughed, cried. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, all tangled in static. And beneath them all, one voice. My father's, whispered my name. "Aaron, don't let her out." The door slammed shut. The lights went out. The air went cold enough to hurt. I stumbled back, reaching for the knob, but it wouldn't move. The static built until it was all I could hear. My vision blurred. My nose started bleeding. And then, clear as day, right beside my ear, she whispered, "You already did." When I came to, it was morning. The door was open. The radio was gone. I stumbled outside, shaking, half blind from the light. The building was empty, completely silent, but I could still hear the static. Not in my ears, not in my head, but under everything, like the world itself was humming. When I got home, my house was freezing. My breath fogged the air. The lights flickered, and the radio, the one that had vanished, was sitting on the kitchen table, clean, polished, perfectly still. And on its dial, etched in red, was a single phrase. The broadcast never ends. To room 313, I should have run. I should have left the radio, left the town, left everything behind. But I didn't. Curiosity, obsession, maybe stupidity. Whatever it was, I stayed. And that's when it got worse. The radio never left my house. I never saw it being placed there, never heard footsteps. I woke up one morning to find it on the kitchen counter, humming quietly, static filling the corners of the room. Every night, Lydia came back, sometimes at the end of the hallway, sometimes standing behind the shower curtain, sometimes, I swear, inside the mirror, grinning. I began to hear voices even when the radio was off. They didn't whisper anymore. They shouted, screamed, they argued. Hundreds of voices overlapping, incoherent yet purposeful. Aaron, finish it. Turn it back on. Why did you leave me? I tried to block it out. Tried wearing headphones. Tried moving the radio outside into the yard. Tried burning it. Nothing worked. The static followed me. The whispers followed me. Even when I left the house, I started hearing things on my phone. Messages I didn't send. Calls from numbers I didn't know. Voicemail boxes filled with static and laughter. Sometimes the recordings were of me sleeping. Sometimes of me talking. But not my words. Their words. Commands. Warnings. Please. One night, I was awake for hours trying to sleep, trying to ignore it. But then the voice spoke clearly. Aaron, you belong to the broadcast now. I froze. My blood ran cold. My room, once familiar, felt alien. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the static. My bed sagged under a weight I couldn't see. Then I heard footsteps, close, circling me. She was here, Lydia, her presence pressing down like water. I dared to open my eyes. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wet hair plastered to her face, hollow eyes staring straight into mine. Why are you afraid? She asked. I didn't answer, couldn't. I was paralyzed, every nerve screaming, every thought screaming, every muscle locked. You heard them, she said. All of them. Every broadcast, every scream, every whisper. You're mine now. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The next day, my mind started slipping. I couldn't tell reality from hallucination. Every shadow in my room had a voice. Every reflection whispered my name. Every radio, every speaker, every phone. It was all alive. And the tape recordings I'd made, they started changing. I would play them back, and new whispers would appear. Commands I didn't hear before. Voices of my father screaming, pleading, warning. Aaron, it never ends. Don't listen. I began to hallucinate her everywhere. The streets, the store, the park, she was there. Watching, waiting, silently grinning. I stopped leaving my house. Stopped answering calls. Stopped going outside. But the radio never stopped. It hummed. It whispered. It laughed. And one night, I realized it wasn't just the radio. It was me. Every thought I had, every word I spoke, every heartbeat. All of it pulsed with static, with whispers. I couldn't think my own thoughts anymore. I couldn't speak my own words. It was Lydia, it was the broadcast, it was the radio. Aaron, you're finally ready, she said. I screamed, but no sound came out. The hallucinations grew worse. The walls bled shadows. Mirrors reflected not my face, but hers. The air grew thick, unbreathable. Every night she drew closer. Every day my sanity slipped further. I tried to destroy the radio again. I tried smashing it, burning it, drowning it. Nothing worked. Every attempt ended the same. I would wake up, exhausted, broken, and the radio would be waiting for me in the same spot, humming softly, static leaking into the air like fog. And the whispers, they never stopped. Aaron, finish it. You know what you must do. I didn't know. I didn't understand. But I felt it, deep in my chest. The pull of something ancient, relentless, patient. Something that had been waiting for me my whole life. I started writing again, trying to capture the voices, trying to leave a record in case I didn't survive. But the voices would overwrite me. They would speak through my hand. Words I never thought, thoughts I never had. And the last entry I wrote that night, I don't even remember. Only the words remain, scratched onto the page in shaky, frantic handwriting. She is everywhere. I am nothing. The broadcast never sleeps. She waits. I am hers. I don't know how long I've been trapped in this loop. Days? Weeks? Months? Time doesn't exist the way it used to. Every night is the same. The static hums. The whispers crawl under my skin. And Lydia, she's closer now than ever. The radio sits at the end of my bed, always plugged in, alive, waiting. She appears in every reflection. Every shadow moves like her. She's patient, deliberate, never leaving, never tired, never silent. Last night, I tried one last thing. I thought I could confront her, end it, destroy the source. I took the radio into the garage, poured gasoline over it, and struck a match. The flames roared. Smoke filled the room. I thought I'd finally free myself. But she appeared in the fire. Not a hallucination. Not a trick of my mind. She was real. She was there. "You can't destroy me," she whispered, her voice rising over the crackle of the flames. "You belong to the broadcast now." The fire burned my hands. I screamed. The flames licked my face. And yet, she was unharmed. She reached through the smoke, her fingers brushing my cheek. Ice, sharp, cutting. The radio exploded. Glass and sparks flew. The room went dark. I should have been free. I wasn't, because the moment the explosion ended, I heard it. Static, faint, distant. And then my own voice. "Aaron, you shouldn't have left me alone." I stumbled backward, my chest heaving. The walls of the garage stretched and warped. Shadows elongated. My reflection in a broken mirror showed her face, not mine. And then I realized the broadcast isn't the radio. It's me. Every thought, every heartbeat, every movement. Part of her. Part of Lydia. Part of this endless loop. I tried to scream. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Only static. Only whispers. I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe I never did. The last thing I remember, before the world shifted completely, she said, "Welcome home," and then silence. Now, sometimes I hear the faint hum in my dreams. Sometimes, when the wind howls, I swear I can hear static creeping through the walls of houses. Radios turning on by themselves, voices whispering names. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's her. Maybe it's you. The broadcast never ends. It never sleeps. It waits. And one day, if you listen too closely, it might find you.